it's Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. We will be talking about running, mental health, youth sport burnout, specialization in sports, motivation, encouragement, coaching, parenting, sleep, nutrition, really anything that you can think of that we as parents or coaches or just runners can do to help our young athletes. In today's episode, I get to talk with Lizzy Cangro. She is a nutrition and wellness coach. We have a super informative, detailed conversation about what she does for a living, but also about her personal experience with having an eating disorder. So just want to issue a trigger warning now for everybody. We do talk about her personal experience with her eating disorder, treatment, what that looked like, influences and other things like that. So if that is not something that you think you should be listening to or want to listen to, maybe just skip this episode. I will say definitely check out her website. She's got lots of great information. We talk about her book. So lots of great things from Lizzy, but if that's just not something for you, definitely feel free to skip this episode. But yeah, we get into some really great conversations. She's super open and vulnerable, and it's really great to get to chat with her. I will also say I had a cold while we were recording this. You will hear it in my voice, but also I don't think I was on my A game. So I appreciate her being just such a great guest and, kind of going with the flow with my questions and all that stuff. So still think it was a great episode, even though I wasn't on my best, but definitely check it out.
Jump right in with the heavy, but just because I don't want to run out of time and rush you on anything. So if you just want to start by, I don't even know where you would start, but kind of just sharing that story and then we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate everything that you're doing. And my passion really is coming from a place of experience. So I was an avid cross-country runner. I am English, so this was in the UK, and I used to absolutely love running. But as I kind of went into my teen years, I started when I was like 10, but when I kind of got into secondary school, high school, the American equivalent, I started to want to eat more healthily. I had an acute awareness that it was really important to be healthy. And that came, I talk about it a bit more in my book, Reclaim the Rebel, which is on the shelf behind me. I talk a bit more about that, but it came from my granddad, who was also a keen runner. He passed away suddenly from a heart attack. And in that moment, I started to look for advice regarding how to fuel my body, how to be healthy, so that something like that didn't happen to me. And as I read more and more, it was the days where social media wasn't around, but I was reading these magazines. I stopped trusting my body more and more. And so I was relying on this external advice, and it wasn't always good advice or balanced advice. And as a result, I became very, very ill and developed a 10-year eating disorder. Now, during that eating disorder, for the first year, it was really undetected, at least kind of like in my naivety. My parents started to detect it more and more. But it was so subtle because I just kind of cut out the, in inverted commas, bad foods, less nutritious foods, and started to run more and more. And the more that I ran, the more that I got praised by the boys because I was good at it. I was bullied in school, but I was really good at running. And so they're like, oh yeah, you're really good at running. So I was like, oh, cool. I get validation from them. And the more that I ran, the skinnier I got because I wasn't fueling myself correctly. But that was really popular with the girls. They're like, oh my goodness, you're getting skinny. And so it was this really vicious cycle of getting validated for something that was really unhealthy. And it really came to a head one day when my parents kind of tricked me into missing my cross country practice, because they're like, oh, you need to go to the doctor because you need to get a vaccine or something like that. And I went to the doctor's office, and the doctor looked at me and he was like, oh my goodness, um, let's take your pulse. And my pulse was like 30 beats per minute. They couldn't draw blood. And essentially, like, he told me go straight to the emergency room. And at that point, that's when kind of reality hit. And I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, and I was told to like stop running any form of exercise. Even walking was banned. And that really started my kind of whole journey into finding, I guess it's self-love and peace with movement and food, so that I could go back to running. I run now, but I have a balanced and healthy approach to how I fuel my body and also how I move my body. So that's the short answer to a very long journey.
Yeah. Wow. So you taught, I feel like there's so many ways to go. Because I'm sure there's so many people who can relate to that. Unfortunately, you talked about the validation you were getting and having that be a vicious cycle. And that was coming from external people, but also I imagine there was some internal things as well. And I know we're going to get into probably later talking about your nutrition and wellness coaching, but do you have any advice? I mean, I know it's hard as like teenagers too, because like you're saying, like the girls are seeing you're getting skinnier and that's what they're looking for, or the guys are seeing you're getting faster and that's something to praise. But advice for us when we're interacting with athletes on things to say, not to say. And I'm sure also coming from your parents' perspective of like, what were the signs that people noticed besides just that you were so skinny? I know I just like made a long question there.
No, and it's a really, really important question, because I think it's something that the faster we can kind of recognize the signs, the faster it can be addressed and kind of nipped in the bud. And I think the key thing is just to notice signs, like physical signs of weight loss, or in the case of other eating disorders, weight gain, and also any changes in behavior around food. So maybe kind of like wanting to go on a specific diet or cut out certain food groups. Like, I announced to my parents that I was going to cut out dairy. Really bad idea. But again, coming from a place of naivety. And so, like, any of those kinds of behaviors around kind of your body and food, but also how the individual is talking about their bodies. So, for example, like saying that your body looks fat, or that you kind of like want to change your body in any way, any of that kind of like inner mean girl talk that I see a lot in both teenagers and adults. Like, it's so pervasive, that kind of like really negative talk about our bodies. So I'd say like definitely watch for that. And then in terms of addressing it, I think coming from a place of curiosity as opposed to kind of an I can't say the word, like accusatory. So rather than kind of like almost going to that place of shame and judgment over like a behavior, maybe just kind of like asking about it, like, oh, what makes you say that about your body? Or why do you want to cut out this food group? And just kind of coming from a place of curiosity, as opposed to coming from a place of kind of almost attacking the behavior. Because I think a lot of people, not everybody, who is starting to show disordered eating behaviors are doing it from a place of there's a reason behind it. And once you kind of get an idea for what that reason is, you can then start to kind of address it from a place of either the nutrition standpoint, or from a kind of more mindset standpoint, because the two definitely go hand in hand, but the kind of process might look different.
Yeah, no, that is definitely great advice for us. Kind of along with that, so like you mentioned your peers noticing you were faster. I imagine your cross country coach noticed that you were faster too. Um, just as a coach also, you know, you want to praise people for being faster. You want to like help them harness whatever is helping them be faster. So what advice, and I don't know if your coach had anything to do with your parents or like any involvement with you, you know, seeking help and those kinds of things, but um I mean, did your coach notice anything? Did they say anything? Or, I mean, and then with that kind of advice for us that we can notice to be like, I'm happy you're faster, but we need to help you. And again, I have to, it's this cold I'm recovering from, but I'm like, I'm asking like 4 questions and I'm like, why don't I just let you answer one?
No, I mean, that actually is something that I haven't really thought about. So it's a really, really great question. And my coach, looking back, she was excellent because what I do remember is that she was very supportive in terms of she knew that I wanted to perform and she knew that I wanted to do well. And she kind of like gave suggestions around my fueling. So I remember one day after practice, she was kind of like, oh, I found that having a bagel with some peanut butter and jelly really helps me before I go run. And as a runner, I remember being like, oh, huh, that's really interesting. Maybe I'll try that. And so she was very good at kind of like making these subtle suggestions that again was coming from a place of like, you know, um, positivity and encouragement as opposed to, oh, you're looking kind of skinny, like we need to address that. Because I think if she had done that, I would have kind of almost sort of retreated back and got defensive. Whereas, because I think an eating disorder can make you very isolated and make you want to isolate. Whereas having that approach, I think she did a really great job because she was like, I'm on your team and I'm just trying to help you. So that was really, really great.
Yeah, I mean, and she also pretty much made it not even like a suggestion, like you should try this. It's great. It's like, hey, this is what I do. And I'm sure you probably looked up to her in some aspect because that's what we often do with coaches, right? No, that's such a great suggestion too, because that is, I don't know if you can hear this thunder, my goodness, but that's something that's so easy that we can do, especially if we notice something or just like in general throwing it out there, like, hey, this is a great way to fuel before we run. So you mentioned now you are running and you have to have a different approach to, you know, your fitness and your health and all those things. I'm not sure if this is too personal of a question to ask, but do you mind kind of just briefly touching on like what recovery looked like? Because I mean, I don't have a whole lot of experience, but knowing that it can be very challenging for people, it can take multiple tries of, you know, different levels of care and things like that. So if you don't mind sharing, or just even sharing like in general, what recovery can look like.
Yeah, and everyone's journey is just so different, but mine was definitely, you know, non-linear. So after 2 years of being in community care, I had to go into hospital because I couldn't gain the weight. And I was in hospital for probably about 2 or 3 months. And then I got discharged back into the community where I still wasn't allowed to really do any exercise. Um, and my food and weight had to be really monitored. So every single week I got weighed in, and if I had lost weight, then you know, there was a underlying assumption that I would go back into hospital, and that was put in place for my own health and safety, but it was also at a point where I just wanted to rebel because my care had been so controlled for me, and I didn't like that, and I wasn't ready to be well. I just wanted to be not in hospital. And so when I got out of hospital, I actually reverted to some very, very dangerous behaviors, including drinking way too much water. Like I would throw my sandwiches away when I was at, it's called sixth form college, but it's like upper high school. And I would drink a ton of water before I got weighed in to hide my weight loss. And so I was kind of like doing like a ton of walking and that type of thing just to like just rebel. And so that got me to a really dangerous place again until I was sick of almost hiding being ill again. And so I started to kind of see a therapist and gain a little bit more weight. And I managed to go off to university. And during university, I kind of got scared of almost like going back to my old way of being and kind of the repercussions of what I had done to my body. And so I was scared to exercise at all. I was scared to walk. I was scared to run for the train. If it was kind of like leaving the station, I'd be like, oh my goodness, and I got into like panic attacks because I was so worried about the damage that I'd done to my body. And so it was a very interesting journey at that point, from going like over exercising to not exercising at all. And again, it was like a theme of not trusting my own body and its capability to heal. And so when I graduated, I moved back in with my parents. And during that time, I got a job at Starbucks. And one day I was lifting this box off the shelf, and I felt this like pull in my lower back. And I was like, uh-oh, what's that? And I didn't tell my parents, but went to my doctor and I said, I don't know what's going on. Can you investigate this? Because one of the side effects of having an eating disorder like anorexia is osteoporosis. And I'd been told about this time and time again throughout the years that I was trying to recover. And so the doctor sent me to have a bone scan, and the results came back. And it turned out that I had osteoporosis in my lower back. And at that moment, that's really where like my recovery journey accelerated, because I was like, oh my goodness, that is not who I am. Osteoporosis is associated with like post menopause. And I was 23. So I decided, then I actually opened up to my parents and said, I need help. And I asked the help, and that's when I really wanted to get better. And so I started doing Pilates to strengthen my bones and kind of like build trust in my own body's ability to move. And I started learning about nutrition and how to get that calcium that my body needed. And that's when I actually decided to retrain and become a nutritionist. So that was a huge long journey of like ups and downs and different kind of experiences with both food and movement, that ultimately kind of resulted in what I call like the Goldilocks zone, where you've got like a balanced approach where you're doing like not too much of one thing and not too much of another thing. Like it's that Goldilocks zone.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Sorry, there's like, as you were finishing what you were saying, a huge thing of thunder came. So now there's like the echo, but thank you so much for sharing that part of your life and your journey, because I think again that makes it very real for people, which also I'm sure can feel very relatable to some. And you actually really nicely segued into what my next question was going to be about, what you are doing now as a nutritionist and wellness coach. So you kind of said how you got there, but what really does that entail? And then do you want to just talk about like who you typically work with and just kind of that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad that it made a nice segue into chatting about what I do, because I absolutely love what I do. Essentially, I help mostly women, but I do have male clients, to achieve that unconditional love for their bodies through letting go of that dieting mentality, through silencing the inner mean girl that I mentioned earlier, and through having a balanced approach to movement. And to me, that's really, really important that we address nutrition, movement, and mindset, because in my experience, they all kind of have an association with one another. And I work with clients across the world. As you can tell from my accent, I'm English, so I have clients in England. I've worked with people in Australia and obviously the US where we're based. So it's mostly people who have been on this journey for a while, because I can kind of speak into that and have that ability to relate. So my clients tend to be sort of between the ages of about 25 to 55. But my oldest client is 75, and my youngest client, I believe, was like 15. So a range of different experiences and walks of life.
So okay, so now I'm like getting scrambled here, thinking too many things at once. You help people with all three of those things. And of course, like through hearing your journey, you talked about the fitness and the physical movement, and you talked about the nutrition, you talked about your mindset and how all of that kind of got you to where you were when you were sickest, but also got you to where you were your healthiest. What are some things that and again, I know you've mentioned that everyone's an individual and things, everyone's journeys with everything can be so different, but what are some things that you work on with your clients, or what would people be struggling with if it's not, an eating disorder specifically or something, but what other things could people be struggling with? They would come get help from you.
Yeah, most of my clients come to me because they're just sick of cycling through, the weight loss diets because they think that it's going to make them feel better, or they're sick of, going to the gym for, 4 hours a day and not seeing any change in how they're feeling in their body. And so they think that these things are going to help them. And what we actually really address are things like changing our self-talk and how we perceive our bodies. So really, it's kind of like looking at it from a deeper perspective, letting go of some of that shoulding on ourselves that we do. Everybody, I'm sure, has an experience somewhere where we've kind of said, well, I should be at this race pace. I should be eating this. I should love my body. And so we kind of like do a lot of work on actually letting that go, letting go of comparison, which is very, very toxic, especially for athletes. It's a very common thing, right? In terms of like performance, but also body image. And we also talk about a way of letting people in and having a cheer squad. I call it a cheer squad, but community behind us, supporting us, whatever our goal is. So whether or not it's improving our athletic performance or finding that inner peace with our bodies, with movement, with food. As I say, that was a really fundamental piece for me. But I think it's something that a lot of us can struggle with in our journeys. So we do a lot of work on that.
Now, this could either be a super simple question or it could be like really hard to answer. I'm not sure. So if you were going to give advice to parents of young athletes or the coaches of young athletes or both together, what is something you could tell us, or a couple of things you could tell us to do so that people aren't coming to you with all of these, as we're growing up there with all of these other, struggles that they're having? So what are some things that we could be doing so we don't give, or I know that people are going to have some internal things that are going to factor into life, but that we aren't helping facilitate having them have these diet issues or body image issues or those kinds of things. I swear I'm more eloquent sometimes. I am like,
oh no, I perfectly understand what you're saying. You're good. So
okay.
I'm like, yes, I know exactly what I want to say here. And that is, I think for parents and for coaches and adults in general, having an awareness of our own stories and beliefs is really, really important so that we can identify the beliefs and stories that we want to pass on to our young athletes and those that we don't want to pass on. So just being really aware of what we're saying and what we're potentially the messages that we're conveying. So a big one would be, labeling foods as good and bad. Praising performance when it's associated with body size. And then from the young athlete perspective, my advice would just be to, again, have that awareness of your stories around your body and your food, and to ask for help from people that you trust, and not try and go it alone. Because it's so tempting to kind of go behind the scenes and think you can get all the answers. But actually, a lot of people are there to support you, and they might not have all the answers. But if they're coming from a good place, and most of the time they are, then they'll have the resources and knowledge to know where to look to get that advice. So, yeah.
And I love that you talk about, a support system, because I know you didn't specifically say necessarily when you were talking about, your personal experience, but you'd mentioned so many different people or roles that people played that were your support system. So, no, that is super great. You pointed to your book behind you. You said that's your book. Is that right? Yes. I was going to say, I keep checking it out over your shoulder. You want to tell us about your book?
I would love to tell everybody about my book. I just had this intuitive nudge to put all of my experiences and the resources that help me and my clients into one place. So the book is called Reclaim the Rebel: 12 Rebellious Acts to Achieve Unconditional Love for Your Body. And essentially, it's this kind of self-contained guidebook that's going to quickly show you tools, simple, easy, effective tools that are going to help in terms of the movement, mindset, and nutrition, that's going to move you away from that kind of the experience of potentially not liking your body or feeling uncomfortable in it, and wanting to shame and judge it, to achieving a more balanced Goldilocks zone, with how you're talking to your body and also how you're treating your body physically. And it's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Apple and all the good places.
You must have read my mind, because I was just unmuting to be like, and where can we find your book? That is awesome. And I will find links, or I'll ask you to send links so I can put that in the show notes. So for people who are looking, they can find it easily that way. And then also, before we wrap it up, where can people find you if they want to obviously meet with you, I guess, one-on-one? But then in addition to that, do you have anything we didn't touch on? Because I know we kind of were a little quick today, but yeah, anything that I didn't ask or anything that you wanted to share, and then how can people find you?
Okay, so let's start with the easy one. So people can find me, probably best place is Instagram. I'm at Nutrition by Lizzy, and Lizzy is spelled with a Y. That's the best place to just kind of get to know me, get any tips and resources that you need. But speaking of resources, I've actually put together a complimentary kind of goodie bag for your listeners. So if they head to nutritionbylizzy, again with a y.com/goodies, they can get their hands on things like, healthy balance recipes, to help you stop kind of doing the calorie counting, things like a feel good playlist, to kind of really just enjoy movement, just kind of like little bits and pieces that I found helped me in my journey to just have more love towards my body. So that's my gift to your listeners.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. And I will make sure I link your Instagram and that as well, the link to the goodies, because that is so, so nice. It has been so great talking to you. And I love being able to find someone who is willing to be so vulnerable with us, but also who kind of shares the same passion for, helping others get the most out of life and feel the best about themselves, but also, just wanting to share information. So it has been so great talking with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you and what you're doing.
Thanks.
I just want to say thank you so much for Lizzy coming on, giving us her time, and also just talking about her personal story and, really just giving us all the information. It was a really great conversation. I had such a great time talking with her. You will be able to find the link to her book and her website in the show notes. So definitely check those things out. I know it is on my list to check out her book as well. So hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Thank you for tuning into Raising Runners. New episodes every Tuesday, and we are always looking to talk to people about running, mental health, or anything along the spectrum that can help our young athletes, or just talking to runners or parents and coaches of our young runners as well. Hopefully you find our resources helpful. If you have questions, comments, or anything else, feel free to email me at marikeyrunclub@gmail.com.